Okay, that'll take us then to our next month, which is June 13th. And on June 13th, 1966, the United States Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in the case of a convicted rapist.
June?
Yep. June 13th of 1966, the United States Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in the case of a convicted rapist. And they ruled in the convicted rapist's favor. And you'll understand when I tell you, hopefully. So on June 13th, 1966, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in the case of a convicted rapist in his favor. The rapist's name was Ernesto Miranda. Ernesta Miranda. And what happened is the United States Supreme Court ruled that confessions are invalid if obtained before a suspect has been informed of their constitutional rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you fail to be able to come up with your own attorney, we'll appoint you one. Well, because of that ruling, it became mandatory that all police officers, without question, read a suspect their constitutional rights, which are now called the Miranda rights. That's where that came from. So if you get pulled over or if you get accused of a crime, the first thing they're going to do to you, if they know what they're doing at all, is they're going to read you your Miranda rights. And that's where that name came from, was when convicted rapist Ernesto Miranda got out of a rape, which he was absolutely guilty in, because the police officers did not read him his constitutional rights. And now they're known as the Miranda rights. Okay, April 17th of 1966, or excuse me, where am I at here? June, we're still in June, June 17th, I was looking at the top of the page. On June 17th, so I'm giving you two things that happened in June of 1966. The first one was the Miranda decision. The second one was on the 17th. What happened on the 17th of June 1966 is two men and a woman were fatally shot at the Lafayette Bar and Grill in Paterson, New Jersey. On June 17th, 1966, two men and a woman were fatally shot, which means they were killed, at the Lafayette Bar and Grill in Paterson, New Jersey. Two men and a woman were fatally shot at the Lafayette Bar and Grill in Paterson, New Jersey. Story to be continued. Okay, July. This is an interesting story. It just tells you how people are just... On July 19th of 1966, July 19th, 1966, Richard F. Speck was identified as the mass murderer of 8 student nurses in Chicago. Big news at the time. July 19th, 1966, Richard F. Speck was identified as the mass murderer of 8 student nurses in Chicago. How do you think he was identified? How was he identified? What do you think? If he murdered 8 student nurses in Chicago, how was he identified probably? By the one that got away. Okay? He was identified by a Filipino exchange student by the name of Corazon Amerso. She was the only survivor of his brutal attack. So Richard F. Speck was identified by a Filipino exchange student by the name of Corazon Amerso. And she survived this brutal assault where 8 of her friends and colleagues as student nurses were murdered. Now where the murder took place was in the dormitory for the hospital. These student nurses stayed in the dormitory just like you'd stay in the dormitory maybe if you went to college. And he basically slashed and stabbed these 8 student nurses to death, and he is, and how, you know how she escaped? What do you think she did? No? She did eventually, but how'd she escape the room? When he was murdering and slashing up all those gals, what did she do?
Jumped up window.
Close. She did something first. What? She did what?
Really good.
Oh, I thought you said, no, you're close. She hid under one of the beds. And as soon as she got her break, she made her way to the window ledge, and she began screaming, "They are all dead. They are all dead. My friends are all dead. Oh God, I'm the only one alive." And the guy fled, and then she survived and identified him later. So she hid underneath the bed while he was, can you imagine that? While he was brutally stabbing and slashing these friends of hers to death, she hides under the bed, makes her way to the window ledge in the dorm, and starts yelling, "They are all dead, they are all dead, my friends are all dead. Oh God, I'm the only one alive," and the guy flees. Okay? Speck was just 24 years old. He was an ex-convict. He was arrested in a hotel in Chicago. And when they found him, he was bleeding profusely from cuts on his right wrist and elbow that occurred when he was committing the murders. So he was arrested. 24-year-old ex-convict was arrested in a hotel in Chicago, and they found him bleeding profusely from cuts on his right wrist and elbow from his horrible assault upon these ladies. It was big news at that time. Okay, we'll move to August. We'll move to August. Okay, on August 1st of 1966, an architectural honors student at the University of Texas made his way atop a 28-story clock tower at the University of Texas in Austin. On August 1st, 1966, an architectural honor student who was enrolled at the University of Texas made his way atop a 28-story clock tower at the University of Texas in Austin. On August 1st, 1966, an architectural honor student made his way on top of the 28-story clock tower at the University of Texas at Austin. And this is what occurred. Be taking notes on this as you go.
The tower of the University of Texas Administration Offices is a landmark. This 27th-floor observation platform used to be a popular place to visit. It offers a
I apologize, you can't hear this very well, so you're going to have to listen. This is recording the days where it didn't have stereo, so it's only coming out of this speaker. I'll see if I can get it more in the middle here for you. But you're really going to have to listen, but I think you'll get the gist of it. Here we go.
a beautiful 232-acre campus with its 50,000 students. On that hot 1st of August, there was no hint just before noon that death would rain down from it for the next hour and a half.
Don't take a ton of notes, just write a couple things down.
The first shot ripped into the leg of a student who was cycling round the campus. 3 more fell in quick succession. By the time the gunman had finished, he had killed 12 people at or near the tower and wounded 30 others.
I'll give you some of those stats, so just write a couple things down.
Finally, 3 policemen and a passerby managed to storm the tower and shoot the gunman dead. He was identified as a 25-year-old architectural student, Charles Joseph Whitman, who his friends had considered the all-American boy. Whitman had been born and raised in the seaside town of Lake Worth, Florida, the eldest of 3 sons. He was neat and hard-working, a Roman Catholic altar boy, and one of the youngest Eagle Scouts on record. His father was a believer in frequent physical punishment, and a self-confessed fanatic about firearms, who boasted that he had raised his sons from babyhood to handle guns. scored 215 shooting points out of 250 to be rated a sharpshooter. However, he was often in trouble for aggressive behavior, getting demoted from corporal to private and serving 30 days for illegal possession of a pistol.
Does that remind you of anybody? Yeah, keep listening.
During his service, he discovered that the military would put him through school, so he obtained a scholarship, and in 1962 was given leave to enroll at the University of Texas to study engineering. He started well, getting high grades, and proving popular with fellow students. That same year, Whitman met this student teacher, Kathleen Meissner. They married shortly afterwards. They seemed a devoted couple, although some friends sensed that she was afraid of a violent streak in her new husband. In 1963, Whitman's grades dropped. His scholarship was removed, and he had to go back to the Marines. He finished his service on the 4th of December 1964 and returned to Austin. Now he switched to architectural engineering and began taking an unusually heavy class load, as well as working long hours to fund his studies. He and Kathy acquired a pleasant house in Jewel Street, and she was able to share the expenses by getting a job as telephonist during the summer months with the local Southwestern Bell Company. Early in 1966, his mother left his father after years of wife-beating and moved to Austin. Charles went to fetch her and called a sheriff's car to stand guard in case his father physically tried to prevent her from leaving. Within a few months, the pressure of work, his father's constant calls to get him to persuade his mother to return, and financial problems drove Whitman to quit school and tell his wife he was leaving her. His professor helped him get a partial scholarship so that he could continue studying, and his bewildered wife persuaded him to start seeing a psychiatrist. Whitman admitted to having fits of rage against family and friends, and that, like his father, he beat his wife. He also revealed that he fantasized about shooting people from the university tower. Whitman's friends like A.J. Vinicic tried to explain what pressures might have made him crack.
Work, scouting, schooling, studying, and so forth. There was a lot of pressure on him.
What do you mean by pressure?
He was trying to cover more ground than he was capable of doing. He was just spread out a little bit too thin.
Whitman was now complaining of exhaustion and increasingly painful headaches. On the 30th of July, just 2 days before the massacre, a friend snapped this picture of him sleeping on the sofa. The following evening, alone at home, Whitman wrote a farewell letter, saying that he hated his father with a mortal passion. He said that he loved his wife, although he was going to kill her. Because I don't want her to face the embarrassment my actions will surely cause her. His friends Larry and Elaine Fuss dropped in as he finished typing.
And when we walked in, he was typing, and he told us he was typing some letters to a few friends. And we just sat down. We had a very normal conversation with him, like nothing out of the ordinary that we've ever had with him before. And he seemed to be in fine spirits. He wasn't depressed about anything. He almost seemed to be relieved, and he was particularly relaxed.
Nevertheless, they felt that all was not well.
He wasn't himself Sunday night as calm and as collected, as personal as he seemed to be. But there were several things that just didn't add up to what he'd always been.
After his friends had left, Whitman drove to the telephone company to pick up Kathy. As usual, he took her home. She evidently had no idea that anything was wrong. But sometime that night, he stabbed her 3 times with a knife while she slept, killing her instantly. Also that night, Whitman Austin to his mother's apartment and killed her by stabbing and shooting. He wrote another note. I have just killed my mother. I am very upset over having done it. However, I feel that if there is a heaven, she is definitely there now. If there is not a heaven, she is out of her pain and misery. I love my mother with all my heart. The intense hatred I feel for my father is beyond all description.
On a summer day in 1966, he climbed the observation tower at the University of Texas and began firing an arsenal of weapons. After 90 minutes of terror, 12 people were dead. The story of Charles Whitman, one of the lives of crime, will continue on the Biography Channel. He was a Marine, a hard-working student, and a husband. But in August of 1966, he climbed the observation tower at the University of Texas and turned it into a tower of death. The story of Charles Whitman, one of the lives of crime, now continues on the Biography Channel.
Whitman spent that night preparing his weapons. The next morning he bought more, so that they totaled 3 rifles, 1 shotgun, 2 revolvers, plus machetes, hunting knives, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He had also collected a stock of food and water, enough to last several days. During the morning, he loaded all this into his car and drove to the university campus, where he was seen by Larry Fuss.
I saw him yesterday morning down in the library at the engineering building. I was just passing by on the way to a class and didn't have time to stop. And besides, he looked unusually distraught. And I just occurred to that the fact that he had an exam coming up that afternoon. And he appeared to be studying. But I stopped and had to look again because I didn't quite recognize him. I guess now I think he was in a state of shock at the time. It's fairly reasonable, but he looked extremely distraught when I saw him in the library.
Sometime after that, he put on grey overalls and loaded his equipment into a builder's trolley. He pushed this over to the entrance to the tower. Mistaken for a maintenance engineer, he managed to take all his gear up to the 27th floor using this elevator. From there, he manhandled his load up 3 short flights of stairs to the observation deck. The clerk who maintained the guest register, Edna Townsley, asked him what he wanted. In reply, he clubbed her with a rifle, crushing her skull. As Whitman was making his final preparations, he heard more footsteps approaching. Margaret Lamport was a tourist visiting the tower with her 15-year-old nephew, Mark, and his family. As they appeared, Whitman fired, killing them both, and wounding Mark's brother and mother. Mark's father was further behind the others and took cover in an office. Then Whitman slammed the door onto the observation platform and barricaded it with furniture. He positioned himself under the gilt-edged clock on the south face of the tower. From there, he had a superb view of the campus in front of the building. He could also see through to the shops on Guadalupe Street, and it was there that Claudia Rutt, aged 18, a promising ballet dancer, was shot down beside her boyfriend, Pat Sontag. As he turned to help her, he too was killed. At first, no one could understand what was happening. Then Harry Walchuk, a 39-year-old political science teacher, was gunned down as he browsed outside one of the bookstores on Guadalupe Street. Now people close to these first victims began to take cover as they realized something was wrong. Thomas Carr also died on Guadalupe Street as he walked back from taking a Spanish exam. Then Whitman spotted figures crossing the campus below. He fired, wounding a pregnant girl. Student Thomas Ekman went to help and was killed immediately with a bullet to the head. Other people who tried to help them were wounded and had to be helped away. Most of the killings happened during the first 20 minutes, while confusion reigned around the campus. People desperately tried to spot the gunman. Peace Corps volunteer Thomas Ashton was killed relaxing on the roof of a building to the north of the tower. Whitman was now moving around the observation platform, picking his targets wherever he could. He had positioned rifles and ammunition so as to cover all sides. The fifth victim, Robert Boyer, a 33-year-old mathematician on his way to an early lunch, was hit in the back and died.